Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst, really, into a topic that's been all over the news lately, mental health in America. And we're going to be, going through some recent data, some statistics, really trying to get to the bottom of what's really going on.
Yeah, it feels like there's just so much information out there, right?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes it feels like you're lost at sea with it.
Hmm.
So hopefully today we can kind of cut through all that noise and figure out not just, what these numbers are telling us, but like what's behind them. Like why are these numbers what they are?
Exactly. And get this, we're talking big numbers here, right? I mean, did you realize almost 1 in 5 adults in the US every year they experience mental illness? It's a pretty crazy stat when you really think about it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And in 2023 alone, we saw a staggering 58.7 million adults.
Wow.
That's like 22.8% of the adult population. So these figures, they come straight from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And yeah, I mean, it really paints a picture, doesn't it? It's pretty widespread.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so before we dive into all that, I think it's good to just take a step back just for a second and just define what we mean by mental illness, right? We're not just talking about, like having a bad day.
No, no, not at all. It's much broader than that. Think of it almost like a spectrum. You've got on one end sort of like the everyday anxieties we all feel, the mood swings, those sorts of things. But then as you move along that spectrum, you get to the more severe conditions, the kind that, really have a huge impact on your life, your day-to-day life.
Got it. Got it. So definitely not, one size fits all kind of thing. Now, one thing that really stood out to me in the data was how much this seems to be affecting young adults. Like, is that something you're seeing too?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Young adults, we're talking 18 to 25-year-olds. They consistently have higher rates of mental illness than any other age group. Like in 2023, it was a shocking 33.8%. That's more than 1 in 3 young adults dealing with a mental health condition.
Wow, over a third. That's heavy. Why is that? I mean, is this just like the stress of figuring your life out, or is there more to it, you think?
I mean, there's definitely more to it than just growing pains, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. This is a time when you're transitioning from adolescence to adulthood, right? It's a period where you're dealing with pressure from everywhere. It feels like everywhere you look, there's pressure. Academics, career choices, relationships, like societal expectations. I mean, it's almost like, trying to juggle flaming chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then you add in social media. I mean, let's be real with social media. It's all about presenting this perfect image, right? This like curated life that, let's be honest, none of us actually live. And I think that creates this pressure, this anxiety, this feeling like you're not good enough.
Yeah, like everyone's comparing, the behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
Right.
No wonder there's so much stress, so much anxiety,
Yeah.
especially for people who are already, feeling a little bit vulnerable, I guess.
Yeah. And we can't discount the economic realities here either, right? A lot of young people right now, they're entering a workforce that looks very, very different from the one their parents had to navigate. I mean, you're talking about student loan debt, a job market that's incredibly competitive, and just, the cost of living, it's just going up and up and up. That's a lot to deal with. It's understandable that it takes a toll.
Yeah, for sure. And it really makes you wonder, are we doing enough to equip young people with like the tools they need, the support systems they need to handle all of that? Maybe it's time to rethink our education systems, our career paths, even just like how we structure our society, so we can actually support their mental well-being.
Now you're talking. It's about creating a society that makes mental health a priority, not just something we react to when things reach a crisis point. Right. And that also means recognizing that not everyone faces the same challenges. Like when you look at the data through the lens of race and ethnicity, it's pretty alarming, some of the disparities that come out.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to ask you about because I was really struck by the data showing how certain racial and ethnic groups experience these challenges, these mental health challenges, at much higher rates than others. It's really quite stark.
Oh, it is. It
Yeah.
is. And it's really where you see these systemic factors, they really rear their ugly head. Like in 2023, multiracial individuals, they reported the highest rates of mental illness, which is it's really troubling, at 36.7%.
Mm-hmm.
And then white adults, they followed at 24%, which, that's about the national average, although still a significant number, of course.
Yeah. But those are some pretty big differences, though,
Mhm.
between those groups. What do you think is contributing to that gap?
Well, it's complex, but I think you have to acknowledge the impact of systemic racism, right? Discrimination, that plays a huge role. Imagine living in a society where you're constantly facing prejudice, microaggressions, where your opportunities are limited simply because of the color of your skin. I mean, that kind of chronic stress, it wears you down. It takes a toll.
And it's not even just about your individual experiences, right? It's also, you have to acknowledge, like, the impact of historical
Yeah.
trauma, right? And then you layer on top of that, limited access to healthcare, and then just the socioeconomic disparities. It's like a perfect storm. It makes it that much harder for certain groups to thrive.
Exactly, exactly. And we can't forget about cultural stigma either, right? In a
Mhm.
lot of communities of color, there's still this huge stigma around mental health. This pressure to, be strong, to be resilient, to just deal with things internally
Mm.
rather than, reaching out for help. And that can prevent people from getting the support they need, and that leads to even more serious consequences down the road.
It speaks to the need for more culturally sensitive approaches to mental health care, right? Like, really addressing these systemic issues, not just the symptoms, but like the root causes. And speaking of root causes, I mean, the data also shows this very clear connection between income level and mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a critical part of this whole conversation, and one that I feel like often gets overlooked. In 2023, individuals who were living below the poverty line, they had a significantly higher rate of mental illness. It was a pretty sobering 29% compared to those at or above 200% of the poverty line who reported 20.6%.
So what's the link there? I mean, is it just that people living in poverty, they just don't have access to the same resources? Or is there something even deeper at play, do you think?
It's almost like you get caught in this vicious cycle,
Mhm.
because poverty brings so much stress. I mean, you're worried about your basic needs, right? Housing, food, you name it. And then there's just this constant instability, never knowing what tomorrow's going to bring. And often there's not a lot of support either. You don't have the same kind of network to fall back on. And all of that takes a toll on your mental health. Of course, when you're struggling with your mental health, it makes it that much harder to break out of poverty.
Mhm.
So it's this really tough cycle to escape.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really tough, and it's heartbreaking, honestly, to think about how many people are, sort of trapped in that cycle, their mental health suffering because of these circumstances that are a lot of times totally outside of their control. It really makes you think about how connected all these issues are. Right? I mean, it's not just about like individual choices, right? It's about building a society that actually like supports the well-being of all its members, right?
100%. And part of that is acknowledging that even within the U.S., the mental health landscape, it's not the same
Yeah.
everywhere, right? Each state has its own story to tell,
Yeah.
shaped by all these different factors.
I've always found that so interesting. It's almost like mental health has its own map. And
Mm.
you see these states, right? Some of them with these significantly higher rates of mental illness than others. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Oh, totally. And then the numbers back it up too. Like back in 2022, Utah, they had the highest rate of adult mental illness.
Right.
It was 29.19%, which was, kind of a surprise, honestly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got New Jersey with the lowest rate, 19.38%.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge difference. I mean, what's the deal with that? What's going on there? Is it access to like mental health services? Is it just cultural attitudes, or is there something else that explains that gap, that difference between the states?
It's probably a whole bunch of things, all tangled up together. Like, for one, states that have really strong public health infrastructure, that definitely makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to mental health services. Like, are they easy to access? Can people afford them?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But yeah, cultural attitudes, they definitely factor into. I mean, there are still a lot of communities out there where there's a huge stigma around mental health issues.
Yeah.
And that keeps people from seeking help, even when they desperately need it.
It's true. And that stigma can be so powerful. It makes people feel like they have to hide what they're going through.
Yeah.
Like they're somehow weak or ashamed for experiencing something that's, a lot of times totally out of their control. It's almost like telling someone with a broken leg to just like walk it off. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It makes
But
no sense. Mental health is just as important as physical health.
Mm.
I mean, we have to start treating it that way. And
Yeah.
and part of that is making sure people can get access to care, but it's also about, like you were saying, tackling that stigma head on. We got to change the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to normalize talking about mental health, right? Like encourage people to actually reach out for help when they need it. Build communities where it's okay to not be okay.
Well said. I love that. It's okay to not be okay. We need to hear that more often. And, I know all these statistics we've been talking about. They can seem pretty overwhelming, right? But they're also a really important starting point. Like, it's because we have this data that we can even begin to understand the scope of what we're dealing with and, more importantly, start working towards solutions.
Totally. Totally. It's not about getting lost in the numbers, but about using them to make a difference. So, as we're sort of coming up to the surface on this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways, the big picture stuff that you hope our listeners are kind of walking away with?
Yeah, it's been pretty heavy, right? I mean, we've been like deep in it with this stuff. But I got to say, I feel like I understand this so much better now.
Yeah, that's what I love about data. It sort of forces you to confront the issue,
Yeah.
right? And then, hopefully gets you asking the right questions. And then who knows, maybe even inspire some action. Right, right. It's not just about like, I don't know, getting overwhelmed by the numbers. It's about, like you said, using them to actually make a change. So as we, I don't know, resurface from this deep dive, what are some of the, I don't know, what are like the big takeaways? What do you hope people are like really thinking about after they listen to this?
I think the biggest thing is I really hope it's clear now that mental health, it's not just a personal issue, right?
Yeah.
It's something we all share. Like
Hmm.
these statistics, they show us just how connected our mental well-being is to everything around us. Our social structures, the economy, even like we talked about where you live, it's all connected.
It's like a reminder that we're not alone in this, right? We're all in it together. And that means, we all have a part to play in creating a society that really values mental well-being for everybody.
100%. And, you know, it starts with understanding the problem like we've been doing today, but that's not enough, right?
Yeah.
We have to like take it to the next level. We have to push for policies that actually put mental health front and center. Whether that's making sure everyone can access affordable health care or finally addressing these systemic inequalities that hit marginalized communities the hardest.
And just like talking about it more, like just
Mhm.
having these conversations.
Yes.
That's going to be part of it too. Breaking down the stigma around mental health, it starts with us. You know, checking in on our friends, our family, building those spaces where people feel safe, like really safe to open up and ask for help when they need it.
Yes. 1,000 times, yes.
Hmm.
Imagine a world where, we treat mental health with the same urgency that we treat physical health, right?
Hmm.
A world where it's seen as a sign of strength to reach out for help, not a weakness. That's what I want to see. That's the goal.
I love that. And that's a future I think we can actually create
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
One conversation, one policy change, one act of kindness at a time. Well, that's a wrap for us on this deep dive into mental health in America. Stay curious, everyone, stay informed, and most importantly, take care of yourselves and each other.